Welcome, dear listener, to a quiet moment set aside just for you. A moment to rest, to breathe, and to drift gently into a calm and peaceful state. You are listening to Sleeping History, where the past is told softly, slowly, and with enough space for your mind to wander wherever it wishes to go. If you find comfort in these gentle journeys through time, you may like to pause for a moment and tap like or subscribe, so that more quiet stories can find their way to you whenever you need them. And now, with your body settling and your thoughts beginning to loosen their grip on the day, we will move together into the soft, unfolding story of the Battle of Hastings, a story from long ago, told in a way that asks nothing of you except to listen, or to drift, or simply to rest. Let us begin. Chapter 1. The calm before the storm. Before the clash of armies, before the famous hill, before the arrow. That legend says changed a kingdom. There was a quieter world. A world of small villages, gentle fields, and people who lived their lives without knowing that history was slowly gathering its breath around them. To understand the Battle of Hastings, it helps to begin far earlier, in the years when England was shaped by many hands. The land was ruled by King Edward, a man remembered as Edward the Confessor, a king who was gentle in spirit and deeply tied to his faith. His reign was calm in some ways, yet beneath the surface there were currents of uncertainty, because Edward had no children and no clear heir to follow him. In those days, the question of who would rule next was not a simple matter. It was a question that drifted through halls and whispered through courts, a question that powerful men watched closely. Among them was Harold Godwinson, a strong and respected nobleman, whose family held great influence. Harold was trusted by many, and he moved through the kingdom with the quiet confidence of someone who understood the weight of responsibility. Across the sea in Normandy, another man watched the English throne with steady interest. William, Duke of Normandy, believed he had been promised the crown by King Edward himself. He held on to this belief with a firm and unwavering grip, and in the stillness of his own halls, he imagined a future where he would rule not only Normandy, but England as well. These two men, Harold and William, lived their lives in different worlds, yet their paths were slowly, gently, inevitably moving toward one another, like two distant tides that would one day meet on a single shore. But for now, the world remained quiet. The people of England tended their fields, repaired their homes, and lived in the rhythm of the seasons. They did not know that armies would soon march across their land, or that a single day of battle would echo through centuries. As King Edward grew older, the question of succession grew heavier. Some said he favored Harold, some said he favored William, and some believed that Edward, in his quiet and contemplative way, had left the matter to fate. When Edward finally passed away in the early days of 1066, the kingdom felt a deep stillness, a stillness that comes when something familiar ends and something uncertain begins. Harold Godwinson was chosen as king by the English nobles, and he accepted the crown with a sense of duty that weighed gently but firmly on his shoulders. Across the sea, William heard the news, and the calmness of the moment shifted. What had been a quiet tension began to take shape, like a distant storm forming on the horizon. But even then the world did not rush. Preparations moved slowly. Decisions unfolded with care, and the people, unaware of the scale of what was coming, continued their lives as they always had. This is where the story truly begins. Not with the clash of swords, but with the quiet before the storm. With a kingdom in transition, a new king settling into his role, and a distant duke preparing for a journey that would change the course of history. And as we rest here, at the edge of this unfolding tale, the world of 1066 feels calm, steady, and unhurried. A world waiting gently for what comes next. Chapter 2. A Kingdom in the Balance. As the year 1066 unfolded, England found itself in a gentle but uneasy transition. Harold Godwinson had taken the crown, and although many in the kingdom accepted him with quiet trust, the air carried a faint sense of uncertainty, like a soft mist that lingers even after the sun has risen. Harold was a capable leader, steady in his decisions and familiar with the needs of the land. He moved through his early days as king with calm determination, tending to matters of governance, listening to his advisers, and offering reassurance to those who wondered what the future might hold. Yet beneath this calm surface, he knew that his claim to the throne would not go unchallenged. Across the sea, William of Normandy held tightly to his belief that the English crown had been promised to him. He remembered conversations with King Edward, moments that he interpreted as assurances, and he believed that Harold had once sworn an oath supporting his claim. Whether these memories were shaped by certainty or by desire, they guided William's thoughts with quiet persistence. In the stillness of his Norman halls, he began to imagine the steps he would need to take, not in haste, but with careful, deliberate planning. Meanwhile, far to the north, another figure watched the unfolding events with interest. Harald Hardrada, the King of Norway, was a man of great ambition, and he believed that an old agreement gave him a right to the English throne as well. His claim was distant, rooted in arrangements made long before. But he held it with the same steady confidence that had carried him through many battles in his life. Though England did not yet know it, another tide was forming far beyond its shores. For the people living in small villages and quiet towns, life continued in its familiar rhythm. They tended their crops, repaired their roofs, and shared simple meals with their families. News traveled slowly, carried by travelers and merchants, and often softened by the time it reached distant corners of the land. Most people knew that a new king had been crowned, but few understood how fragile the moment truly was. Harold, aware of the dangers that might come from across the sea, began to prepare. He strengthened defenses along the southern coast, gathering men who were loyal and experienced. These preparations were not rushed or frantic. They were steady, thoughtful, and shaped by Harold's understanding of the land he now ruled. He knew that England's safety depended on patience as much as on strength. Summer drifted across the countryside, warm and unhurried. The long days brought a sense of peace, even as Harold kept watch for signs of Norman sails on the horizon. Weeks passed, then months, and still the sea remained calm. The winds did not favor William's crossing, and the weather held him in Normandy longer than he wished. This delay gave Harold a quiet sense of relief, though he never allowed himself to fully relax. As the season stretched on, Harold's men grew tired of waiting. Many were farmers who longed to return to their fields before the harvest slipped away. Harold understood their needs, and eventually he allowed much of his army to return home, trusting that he would have time to gather them again if danger approached. It was a gentle decision, shaped by compassion as much as strategy. But even as Harold eased his watch on the southern coast, events were stirring in the north. Harald Hardrada, the distant Norwegian king, was preparing his own journey toward England. His plans moved quietly, far from Harold's sight, and the winds that had held William back carried Hardrada forward. England, without fully realizing it, was becoming the center of a gathering storm. Not a sudden storm, but one that formed slowly, patiently, with each passing day. A storm shaped by ambition, by promises remembered differently, and by the shifting tides of power. And yet, in this moment before the storm broke, the kingdom still felt calm. The fields were full, the villages peaceful, and the people unaware of how close their world was to changing. Harold stood at the heart of it all, steady and thoughtful, carrying the weight of a crown that many others desired. This quiet balance, delicate and temporary, would not last. But for now, the kingdom rested in a gentle pause, a breath held softly between what had been and what was soon to come. Chapter 3. The Northern Wind. As summer slowly gave way to the cooler breath of early autumn, England remained unaware that its first great challenge of the year would not come from the south, where Harold had watched so patiently, but from the distant north. The winds that had held William in Normandy carried another fleet across the sea, a fleet led by Harold Hardrada, the King of Norway, whose ambitions stretched far beyond his own shores. Hardrada was a seasoned warrior, known for his strength and determination. Yet in this quiet telling, it is enough to think of him simply as a man who believed the English crown should be his. He gathered his forces with calm confidence, moving steadily toward a land he had long imagined ruling. His ships, long and narrow, slipped across the water like shadows, guided by the steady rhythm of the oars and the soft push of the wind. With him traveled Tostig Godwinson, the exiled brother of King Harold. Tostig had once held power in the north of England, but his rule had been troubled, and he had been driven away by those he once governed. Now he returned not as a lord seeking forgiveness, but as an ally to Hardrada, hoping that a change in kingship might restore what he had lost. Their partnership was unusual, yet bound together by shared ambition and a quiet sense of opportunity. When their fleet reached the English coast, it moved with a calm and steady purpose. Villagers along the shoreline saw the unfamiliar sails and felt a ripple of fear. But the invasion was swift, and the northern forces pressed inland with little resistance. The people of the region were caught off guard, their thoughts still on the harvest and the turning of the seasons, not on armies arriving from across the sea. Harold Godwinson, still in the south, received the news with a heavy heart. He had expected William to be the first threat, not Hardrada. But Harold did not hesitate. He gathered his household troops, the men who stayed closest to him, and sent word across the land for others to join him. The response was steady, though many had only just returned to their homes after months of waiting along the southern coast. Still they came, loyal and willing, moving northward with their king. The journey was long, stretching across the breadth of England. Yet, Harold pressed on with quiet determination. He understood the urgency, but he also understood the need for calm leadership. His men marched at a steady pace, their footsteps carrying them through forests, over hills, and along winding paths that connected one village to the next. The land around them shifted gently from the warmth of late summer to the first hints of autumn's cool embrace. Meanwhile, Hardrada and Tostig advanced deeper into the north, capturing the city of York after a brief struggle. They believed the region would soon accept their rule, and for a moment the invaders allowed themselves to rest. The air around them was calm, and the fields stretched out in quiet waves of green and gold. It seemed, for a brief time, that their campaign might unfold without great resistance. But Harold was closer than they realized. His march north had been swift, far swifter than most would have expected, and he approached the region with a sense of steady resolve. He did not rush his men, yet he did not delay. Each day brought them nearer to the moment when they would meet Hardrada's forces, though none could yet imagine how soon that moment would come. As Harold neared York, the northern wind carried with it the faint scent of change. The calm that had settled over the region was beginning to shift, though gently, like the first stirrings of a breeze before a storm. Hardrada's men, unaware of how close Harold had come, prepared for what they believed would be a peaceful gathering of hostages and supplies. They did not expect battle. They did not expect Harold. And so, the stage was set for a meeting that would shape the fate of the kingdom. Not on the southern coast, where William still waited for the winds to turn, but in the north, where two armies would soon face one another beside a quiet river crossing. For now, though, the land remained still. The river flowed softly, the fields lay open and undisturbed, and the people of England, scattered across their villages and farms, continued their lives unaware that the first great clash of 1066 was only moments away. The northern wind carried the story forward, gently, toward the place where the calm would finally break. Chapter 4. The Battle at Stamford Bridge. The early morning of September 25th arrived with a quiet stillness, the kind that settles gently over fields and rivers before the day has fully begun. Along the banks of the River Derwent, near a simple crossing called Stamford Bridge, the world felt calm and unhurried. The soft light of dawn touched the grass, the water, and the distant hills. Unaware that this peaceful place would soon become the center of a great turning point. Harold Hardrada and his men were resting nearby, believing that the people of York would soon offer hostages and supplies. They felt no urgency, no sense of danger. Many of them had left their armor behind at their ships, thinking the day would pass quietly. The air around them was filled with the gentle sounds of conversation, the rustle of clothing, and the steady flow of the river. But Harold Godwinson was already close. His long march from the south had been swift and determined, yet it carried a calm purpose rather than haste. He and his men approached the area with steady footsteps, their minds focused, their bodies weary but resolute. They had traveled far, yet the quiet strength of their king guided them onward. When Harold reached the outskirts of York, he paused only briefly before continuing toward Stamford Bridge. The morning light grew brighter, revealing the shapes of Hardrada's forces across the river. For a moment, the two sides simply existed in the same space, separated by water and by the gentle rise of the land. There was no rush, no sudden movement, only the slow realization that the peaceful morning was shifting. Harold sent a message across the river, offering Hardrada and Tostig a chance to leave peacefully. It was a gesture made with calm authority, though he knew it was unlikely to be accepted. Hardrada refused, confident in his strength, unaware of how unprepared his men truly were. And so, the quiet moment dissolved, giving way to the steady preparations for battle. The fighting that followed was fierce, yet in this soft retelling, it is enough to imagine the slow, steady movements of two armies meeting on a narrow bridge and the fields beyond it. Hardrada's men, caught without their full armor, struggled to form their lines, while Harold's forces pressed forward with determination shaped by the long journey behind them. The clash was not sudden, but unfolded gradually, like a storm building from a gentle breeze. One part of the battle became known for a lone warrior who held the narrow bridge against Harold's men for a long time. His stand slowed the English advance, giving Hardrada's forces precious moments to gather themselves. In the calm of this telling, he becomes a quiet symbol of resolve, a reminder of how a single person can shape the flow of events, even if only for a short while. Eventually, Harold's men crossed the river and met Hardrada's army on the open ground. The fighting continued, steady and unrelenting, until Hardrada himself fell. His death marked a turning point, and though Tostig tried to continue the struggle, the Norwegian forces began to falter. By the end of the day, the invaders were defeated, and the quiet fields around Stamford Bridge returned to stillness. Harold allowed the surviving Norwegians to leave peacefully, offering them ships to return home. It was a gentle decision, shaped by the understanding that enough lives had already been lost. The river flowed softly once more, washing away the sounds of battle, leaving only the whisper of water against stone. For Harold and his men, there was little time to rest. They had won a great victory, yet the weight of the moment pressed heavily upon them. Their bodies were tired, their spirits stretched thin, and the long march north had taken its toll. But even as they breathed in the cool evening air, a new message was already on its way. William of Normandy had finally crossed the sea. The calm that followed the northern battle was brief, like a single deep breath before another long journey. Harold would soon turn south again, carrying with him the quiet knowledge that the greatest challenge of the year still lay ahead. And for now, the fields around Stamford Bridge settled back into silence, holding the memory of a day that changed the course of England's story. Chapter 5. The Long Road South. The victory at Stamford Bridge brought a quiet sense of relief to Harold and his weary men, yet it was a relief softened by exhaustion. They had marched the length of England, fought a long and difficult battle, and now stood far from home. Far from rest, and far from the next challenge that was already waiting for them. For a brief moment, the land around them felt peaceful. The cool air of early autumn drifted gently across the fields, carrying with it the soft scents of earth and grass. The men breathed slowly, letting their tired bodies settle, even if only for a short while. But Harold knew that this calm could not last. A messenger had arrived with news that William of Normandy had finally crossed the sea and landed on the southern coast. The long-expected moment had come. Harold received the message with a quiet heaviness. He understood what it meant. The greatest test of his reign was no longer a distant possibility, but a reality unfolding far to the south. He allowed his men a little time to recover. But only a little. The journey ahead would be long, and the days were growing shorter. When they began their march south, the pace was steady and measured. Harold did not push his men beyond their limits. He knew they were tired, and he knew that the strength they would need for the coming battle depended on conserving what little energy they had left. So they moved slowly, passing through villages and along familiar roads, their footsteps blending with the quiet rhythm of the countryside. The people they encountered along the way greeted them with gentle gratitude. Word of the victory in the north had begun to spread, and many offered food, water, or simple blessings. These small acts of kindness helped sustain the weary soldiers, reminding them that they were not alone in their efforts. The kingdom they defended was watching, hoping, and quietly praying for their safety. As the army moved southward, the landscape changed gradually. The rolling hills of the north gave way to softer fields and wider stretches of open land. The trees began to show the first hints of autumn color, their leaves turning pale gold and soft red. The air grew cooler, carrying with it the gentle promise of the season's slow transformation. Harold walked among his men, speaking to them in calm tones, offering reassurance where he could. He understood their fatigue, for he felt it as well. Yet he also understood the importance of their purpose. William's landing meant that the future of England hung in a delicate balance, and every step they took brought them closer to the moment when that balance would shift. Along the way, Harold paused at London, gathering fresh troops and allowing his northern soldiers a brief chance to rest. The city welcomed him with quiet respect, aware of the burden he carried, but even here, in the heart of his kingdom, Harold did not linger. He knew that William was fortifying his position near the coast, preparing for the confrontation that would decide the fate of the crown. When Harold resumed his march, the mood of the army was calm and steady. The men understood the importance of what lay ahead, yet they moved without fear or haste. Their steps were guided by duty, by loyalty, and by the quiet hope that their efforts would protect the land they called home. As they approached the southern regions, the signs of William's presence became clearer. Villages had been touched by the Norman arrival, though not violently. William had moved carefully, establishing his camp near Hastings and waiting for Harold to come to him. The two leaders, each confident in his claim, were now drawing closer with every passing day. The long road south was nearly complete. Harold and his men had crossed the length of England twice in a single year, guided by the shifting winds of fate. Their bodies were tired, but their resolve remained steady, shaped by the quiet understanding that the next battle would be the one remembered for centuries. As the sun set on the final evening before they reached the region around Hastings, the land grew still once more. The soft glow of twilight settled over the fields, and the men rested in calm silence, knowing that the story of their journey was nearing its most important moment. And in that gentle quiet, the world seemed to pause, holding its breath as two armies prepared to meet on a hill that would soon become part of history. Chapter 6. William's quiet advance. While Harold and his weary men made their long journey south, William of Normandy was settling into the land he had crossed the sea to claim. His arrival on the Sussex coast had been steady and deliberate, shaped not by haste but by careful planning. The winds that had held him in Normandy for so long had finally shifted, and when they did, William crossed the Channel with a sense of calm purpose, bringing with him soldiers, horses, supplies, and the quiet certainty that his moment had come. When his fleet reached the English shore, the landing was peaceful. There was no army waiting to oppose him, no resistance to slow his steps. The beach stretched out before him in gentle curves, touched by the soft rhythm of the waves. William and his men moved inland with measured care, establishing a camp near the town of Hastings. They built fortifications, gathered food, and prepared themselves for the confrontation they knew would eventually come. William understood that Harold was far away in the north, and he used this time wisely. He allowed his men to rest after the long voyage, tending to their horses and repairing their equipment. He sent scouts across the countryside, learning the shape of the land and the paths that wound through the hills. He did not rush, for he knew that Harold would come to him, drawn by duty and by the weight of the crown he carried. The people of Sussex watched these events with quiet unease. Some fled inland, seeking safety, while others stayed in their homes, uncertain of what the future would bring. William treated the region with a careful balance of firmness and restraint. He needed supplies, but he also needed the land to remain stable. So his men gathered what they required, but they did so under William's steady guidance, avoiding unnecessary destruction. As the days passed, William's camp grew stronger. Tents rose in neat rows, fires burned softly in the evenings, and the sounds of preparation drifted through the air like a low, constant hum. The Normans trained with calm discipline, practicing their formations, tending to their weapons, and readying themselves for the battle they knew was approaching. Their horses grazed in nearby fields, their armor was polished, and their spirits remained steady. William himself moved through the camp with quiet confidence. He spoke to his commanders, reviewed maps, and considered the best ground on which to meet Harold's army. He understood the importance of patience. He knew that Harold would be tired from his northern campaign, and he trusted that time was on his side. The longer he waited, the more the balance of strength would shift in his favor. Yet even in this calm period of preparation, William remained alert. He knew that Harold was a capable leader, one who had already proven his strength at Stamford Bridge. He respected his opponent, not with fear, but with a steady awareness that the coming battle would be decisive and demanding. The crown of England would not be won easily. As the Normans settled into their temporary home near Hastings, the landscape around them remained peaceful. The rolling hills, the quiet woods, and the open fields gave no hint of the great struggle that would soon unfold. The days passed gently, marked by the slow turning of the season and the soft shift of the autumn light. Then, one evening, word reached William that Harold was on the move. The English king had left London and was marching south with renewed determination. The long-expected moment was drawing near. William received the news with calm readiness. He did not rush to meet Harold, nor did he retreat. He simply prepared, steady and unshaken, knowing that the hill near Hastings would soon become the place where their two paths would meet. And so, as the night settled over the Norman camp, the air grew still. The fires burned softly, the men rested, and the land around them waited in quiet anticipation. The story of 1066 was moving toward its most remembered moment, carried forward by the slow, steady steps of two determined leaders. The calm before the great battle was nearly at its end. Chapter 7. The night before the battle. As Harold's army drew closer to the hills near Hastings, the soft light of late afternoon settled gently over the land. The fields stretched out in quiet waves, touched by the muted colors of early autumn, and the air carried a cool stillness that seemed to pause the world for a moment. It was here, on this calm landscape, that Harold chose to rest his men before the coming day. The soldiers settled themselves along the ridge that would soon be known as Senlac Hill. They laid down their shields, loosened their armor, and allowed their tired bodies to sink into the earth beneath them. Some spoke in low voices, sharing quiet thoughts with those beside them. Others simply closed their eyes, letting the long journey and the weight of the past weeks drift gently through their minds. Harold moved among them with a steady presence. He did not speak loudly or with urgency. Instead, he offered soft words of reassurance, reminding his men that they had faced great challenges before and had stood strong together. His calmness settled over the camp like a blanket, easing the tension that had begun to gather in the air. As evening deepened, the sky shifted into soft shades of blue and violet. A few small fires flickered gently, their light dancing across the faces of the men who sat nearby. There was no singing, no celebration, only the quiet murmur of voices and the occasional sound of armor being adjusted or a cloak being pulled tighter against the cool breeze. Across the fields, not far away, William's camp also settled into the stillness of night. The Normans rested with a sense of readiness, their preparations complete, their minds focused on the day ahead. William himself remained calm, confident in the strength of his forces and the careful planning that had brought him to this moment. Yet even in his confidence, he understood the weight of what was to come. Between the two camps, the land lay silent. The gentle slopes, the scattered trees, and the quiet paths held no hint of the struggle that would soon unfold. The animals of the forest moved softly through the underbrush, unaware of the armies resting nearby. The wind drifted lightly across the hills, carrying with it the faint scent of wood smoke and the distant murmur of human voices. As darkness settled fully over the land, Harold found a quiet place to sit. He looked out across the fields, his thoughts steady and unhurried. He knew that the coming day would shape the future of his kingdom. Yet he did not allow fear or doubt to disturb his calm. He simply breathed, letting the cool night air fill his lungs, grounding himself in the present moment. The men around him gradually fell into sleep, their breaths slow and even. Some dreamed of home, of families waiting far away. Others drifted into a deep, dreamless rest, their bodies grateful for the stillness after so many days of marching. The camp grew quiet, the fires dimming to soft embers. In William's camp, the night passed in much the same way. The Normans rested with disciplined calm, their horses settled, their weapons prepared. They too felt the weight of the coming day, though they carried it with a quiet steadiness shaped by long training and shared purpose. Above both camps, the stars shone softly, scattered across the sky like distant lanterns. They watched over the sleeping armies, silent and unchanging, as they had watched over countless nights before. The moon cast a gentle glow across the hills, illuminating the land that would soon become a place of memory and legend. And so the night passed, slow and peaceful, holding the world in a delicate stillness. Two armies rested, two leaders prepared, and the land itself seemed to breathe in quiet anticipation. The dawn would come soon enough, bringing with it the moment that history would remember. But for now, the world remained calm, wrapped in the soft embrace of night, waiting gently for the first light of morning. Chapter 8. Dawn on Senlac Hill. The morning of October 14th arrived slowly, as though the sun itself understood the weight of the day ahead and chose to rise with gentle care. A pale light spread across the fields near Hastings, touching the tops of the hills and drifting softly through the trees. The world seemed quiet, almost hesitant, as if holding its breath before the first stirrings of life began to move through the camps below. On the ridge of Senlac Hill, Harold's men woke to the cool air of early morning. They rose quietly, stretching stiff limbs and adjusting their gear with slow, deliberate movements. There was no rush, no loud commands, only the steady rhythm of preparation. The long night had given them a small measure of rest, and now they faced the day with calm resolve. Harold himself stood near the center of the line, watching the land below as the light grew stronger. From his vantage point, he could see the gentle slopes stretching downward, the open fields beyond, and the distant shapes of the Norman camp beginning to stir. He breathed deeply, letting the cool air settle his thoughts. He knew that this hill, simple and unremarkable on any other day, would soon become the place where the future of England would be decided. The English army formed its shield wall with quiet discipline. Men stood shoulder to shoulder, shields overlapping, creating a solid line that had served them well in battles past. Their weapons were simple but familiar, shaped by years of practice and the steady rhythm of daily life. They did not speak much, for words were not needed. Their presence, their unity, and their shared purpose spoke for them. Below the hill, the Norman camp came to life. William's men moved with calm efficiency, preparing their horses, checking their armor, and gathering in their formations. The soft clatter of metal and the low murmur of voices drifted upward, carried by the morning breeze. William himself rode among his troops, offering quiet encouragement, his presence steady and reassuring. The Normans arranged themselves in 3 groups, each with its own role to play. Archers stood at the front, their bows ready. Infantry gathered behind them, steady and disciplined. And further back, the cavalry prepared their horses, the animals snorting softly in the cool air. The arrangement was careful, deliberate, shaped by William's understanding of how to break a strong defensive line. As the sun rose higher, the 2 armies faced one another across the gentle slope. The distance between them was not great, yet it felt filled with the weight of history. The land lay quiet, the air still, as though the world itself wished to delay the moment when the calm would finally give way. Harold looked along his line, seeing the faces of the men who had marched with him from the north, who had stood beside him at Stamford Bridge, and who now stood ready once more. He felt a quiet pride in their resolve, a steady warmth in their loyalty. He knew they were tired, yet he also knew they would hold as long as they could. William, too, surveyed the field. He saw the strength of the English position, the firmness of their shield wall, and the determination in their stance. He understood that the day would be long and demanding. But he also believed deeply in his cause, in his preparation, and in the men who followed him. For a moment the world seemed to pause. The breeze softened. The sounds of the camps faded, and the 2 armies stood in quiet stillness, facing one another across the slope of Senlac Hill. Then, slowly, the morning continued. The sun climbed a little higher. The shadows shifted, and the first movements of the day began to unfold, gentle and unhurried, as though the land itself wished to ease the world into what was coming. The calm of dawn lingered for just a little longer, wrapping the hill in a soft, steady light. It was the final moment of peace before the long day began, a moment that would be remembered only in the quiet spaces between the lines of history. And as the morning settled fully over the fields, both armies stood ready, waiting for the day to unfold in its own slow, inevitable way. Chapter 9. The first movements of the day. As the morning settled fully over Senlac Hill, the soft light continued to spread across the landscape, touching the armor of the English soldiers and the banners of the Normans with a gentle, steady glow. There was no sudden beginning, no sharp signal that broke the quiet. Instead, the day unfolded slowly, like a long breath being released after a night of stillness. The Normans were the first to move. Their archers stepped forward with calm precision, lifting their bows in a smooth, practiced motion. The air around them felt cool and quiet, carrying only the faint rustle of clothing and the soft creak of bowstrings being drawn. When the first arrows rose into the sky, they did so in a gentle arc, drifting upward before beginning their slow descent toward the English line. The arrows fell lightly against the shield wall, tapping against wood and leather with soft, muted sounds. The English soldiers held their ground, their shields overlapping, their bodies steady. They had faced arrows before, and they understood how to stand firm beneath them. The shield wall remained unbroken, a calm and solid presence on the ridge. Seeing that the arrows alone would not break the English line, William signaled for his infantry to advance. They moved forward with measured steps, climbing the gentle slope towards the waiting shields. Their movements were steady, shaped by discipline and long training. The English watched them come, their breaths slow and even, their hands resting firmly on their weapons. When the two sides met, the sounds of the day grew a little louder, though still without haste or chaos in this quiet telling. The clash of shields, the soft thud of footsteps on the earth, and the low murmur of voices blended together into a single, steady rhythm. The English held their position, their shield wall absorbing the pressure of the Norman advance. The Normans pushed, but the hill favored the defenders, and the line remained firm. William observed the field with calm attention. He understood that the English position was strong, and that breaking it would require patience as much as force. He allowed his infantry to continue their steady efforts, knowing that each moment of pressure wore down the defenders little by little. The English, for their part, stood with quiet determination. They had fought together many times, and the shield wall was as familiar to them as the tools of their daily lives. They leaned into their shields, bracing against the Norman push, their feet planted firmly in the earth of the hill they defended. As the morning continued, the Norman cavalry began to move. The horses stepped forward with slow, deliberate strides, their breath rising in soft clouds in the cool air. The riders adjusted their grips, their movements calm and controlled. They did not rush into the fray, but approached with the same steady purpose that had guided the Normans since dawn. The English watched them come, knowing that the cavalry would test their line in a new way. Yet they did not waver. Their shields remained locked, their bodies steady, their minds focused on the simple act of holding the hill. The first charge of the cavalry was not a sudden burst of speed, but a gradual increase in movement, a slow gathering of momentum as the horses climbed the slope. When they reached the English line, the impact was firm, but not overwhelming. The shield wall absorbed the force, bending slightly, but not breaking. The English held, their unity stronger than the push of the horses. William watched carefully, noting how the English responded, how the line shifted, how the hill shaped the flow of the battle. He understood that this would be a long day, a day that required patience, observation, and careful adjustment. And so the morning continued, with each side testing the other in slow, steady movements. The sun climbed higher, casting a warm glow across the field. The sounds of the battle remained measured, never rushing, never breaking the calm rhythm that had settled over the hill. The day was only beginning, and both armies understood that the outcome would unfold gradually, shaped by countless small moments rather than a single decisive strike. The calm of dawn had passed, but the steady, unhurried pace of the battle carried its own quiet weight, guiding the story forward with gentle inevitability. The hill, the sky, and the soft autumn air held them all in a slow, unfolding moment as the long day of Hastings continued to take shape. Chapter 10. The shield wall holds. As the morning continued to unfold across Senlac Hill, the English shield wall remained firm and steady, a quiet line of resolve stretching along the ridge. The men stood close together, their shields overlapping like pieces of a single, unbroken barrier. They breathed slowly, their bodies moving in a calm rhythm shaped by long experience and shared purpose. The sounds of the Normans below drifted upward, but the English held their ground with patient determination. The Norman infantry pressed forward again, their steps measured, their movements deliberate. They climbed the slope with steady effort, meeting the shield wall with the same slow, persistent pressure that had marked the early hours of the day. The clash was not sudden or chaotic in this gentle telling. It was a gradual meeting of two forces, each pushing against the other with quiet strength. The English absorbed the impact, leaning into their shields, bracing their feet against the earth. They did not rush, nor did they falter. Their line bent slightly under the weight of the Norman advance, but it did not break. The hill supported them, giving them the advantage of height, and their unity gave them the strength to hold. William watched from below, observing the way the English line responded to each movement. He saw how the shield wall shifted, how it absorbed pressure, how it remained steady even when tested by infantry and cavalry alike. He understood that breaking such a formation would require patience and careful adjustment. The day would not be won quickly. The Norman cavalry made another slow approach, their horses climbing the slope with deliberate steps. The riders guided them with calm control, their movements smooth and practiced. When they reached the English line, the impact was firm but not overwhelming. The shield wall held once more, absorbing the force with the same quiet strength it had shown throughout the morning. Some of the English soldiers murmured softly to one another, offering small words of encouragement. Others remained silent, focusing on the steady rhythm of holding their shields, adjusting their stance, and breathing through the effort. The shield wall was more than a formation. It was a shared act of endurance, a collective promise to stand together for as long as they could. As the hours passed, the Normans began to adjust their tactics. William signaled for his archers to move again, hoping that a different angle might find a weakness in the English line. Arrows rose into the sky once more, drifting downward in gentle arcs. Some struck shields, some fell harmlessly to the ground, and a few found small gaps between the defenders. But the shield wall remained intact, its strength drawn from the unity of the men who formed it. The sun climbed higher, warming the air and casting long shadows across the slope. The sounds of the battle remained steady and measured, never rushing, never breaking the calm rhythm that had settled over the hill. The English continued to hold, their bodies tired but their resolve unshaken. William observed all of this with quiet focus. He understood that the English position was strong, and that breaking it would require more than simple force. He needed the English to move, to shift, to open a gap that his cavalry could exploit. But Harold's men remained disciplined, their line as firm as the ridge beneath their feet. And so the morning wore on, with the shield wall standing as a calm, steady presence on the hill. The Normans pressed, the English held, and the land around them remained wrapped in the slow, unfolding rhythm of the day. The shield wall had not broken. It had not even wavered. But the long hours of holding, of bracing, of absorbing each new push were beginning to weigh on the men. Their arms grew heavy, their breaths deeper, their movements slower. The day was far from over, and both sides understood that the battle would continue to unfold in its own patient, deliberate way. The hill, the sky, and the soft autumn air held them all in a quiet balance as the story of Hastings moved gently toward its next moment. Chapter 11. The Turning of the Tide. As the sun continued its slow climb across the sky, the long hours of steady pressure began to weigh gently on both armies. The English shield wall still held its place along the ridge, firm and familiar, yet the men behind it were growing tired. Their arms felt heavy from holding their shields, their breaths deeper from the constant effort of bracing against each new push. Still, they stood together, bound by the quiet strength that had carried them through the morning. Below them, the Normans continued their measured attempts to break the line. William watched the field with calm attention, noting how the English responded to each movement. He saw the steadiness of their formation, the way they leaned into their shields, the way they resisted every advance. He understood that force alone would not be enough. Something else would need to shift before the day could turn in his favor. It was during one of these steady exchanges that a moment of uncertainty began to ripple through the Norman ranks. A group of soldiers, pressed back by the firmness of the English line, began to fall away from the slope. Their retreat was not planned, not commanded, but a natural response to the pressure they faced. As they moved back, others followed, and soon a portion of the Norman line appeared to be withdrawing down the hill. From above, the English saw this movement and felt a quiet stirring of hope. It seemed for a moment that the Normans might be faltering. Some of Harold's men, carried by the slow rise of confidence and the long hours of holding their ground, stepped forward. They moved beyond the safety of the shield wall, following the retreating Normans down the slope. Their steps were not rushed, but they carried a sense of release, a gentle easing of the tension that had held them in place for so long. Yet in leaving the line, they opened small gaps, spaces where the unity of the shield wall began to loosen. The hill that had protected them now became a place where their formation stretched thin. William saw this movement and understood its meaning. He recognized the opportunity forming before him, shaped not by force but by the natural ebb and flow of the battle. With calm precision, he signaled for his cavalry to turn. The retreating soldiers slowed, then steadied, and the Norman horsemen began to circle back toward the English, who had advanced down the slope. The movement was smooth, almost gentle in its unfolding. The cavalry curved around like a slow tide returning to shore, their horses stepping with controlled strength. The English who had moved forward found themselves exposed, separated from the line above. They fought with determination, but without the support of the shield wall, their position was fragile. The Normans pressed in, not with sudden violence, but with steady, coordinated effort. The English who had advanced were gradually pushed back, their numbers thinning, their strength stretched thin. Above them the shield wall remained, but now it carried the quiet weight of knowing that part of its strength had been drawn away. Harold watched the unfolding moment with calm focus. He understood what had happened, and he knew that the shield wall must hold despite the gaps that had begun to appear. He moved along the line, offering steady reassurance, reminding his men to remain firm, to stay together, to trust in the strength they still possessed. The Normans, encouraged by the shift in momentum, began to press more confidently. Their movements remained measured, their formations controlled, but there was a new sense of possibility in the way they approached the hill. They had seen the English line bend, and they understood that it might bend again. Yet even with these changes, the battle did not rush forward. It continued in the same slow, deliberate rhythm that had shaped the entire day. Each movement unfolded with patience, each shift in the line happening gradually, like the turning of a tide that moves almost imperceptibly. until the shoreline has changed. The English shield wall still stood, though thinner now, its edges softened by the long hours of effort. The Normans continued their steady advance, guided by William's calm observation and careful adjustments. The hill remained the center of it all, holding the weight of both armies as the day moved gently toward its next moment. Nothing had been decided yet. The tide had begun to turn, but it had not yet reached the shore. The story of the battle continued to unfold, slow and steady, shaped by the quiet persistence of both sides as they faced one another beneath the soft autumn sky. Chapter 12. The Slow Unraveling of the Line. As the day moved gently into its later hours, the long rhythm of the battle continued to unfold across Senlac Hill. The sun hung a little lower in the sky now, casting softer light across the fields and touching the armor of both armies with a warm, muted glow. The air carried the steady sounds of effort, of shields meeting pressure, of footsteps shifting on the slope, all blending into a calm, continuous hum that seemed to stretch across the entire hillside. The English shield wall, though still standing, had begun to feel the quiet strain of the long day. The men who formed it had held their ground through countless pushes, countless arrows, and countless moments of steady resistance. Their arms were heavy, their breaths deep, and their movements slower than they had been in the morning. Yet they remained together, bound by the same quiet determination that had carried them through every hour so far. Harold moved along the line with calm purpose, offering soft words of reassurance. He reminded his men to stay close, to keep their shields overlapping, to trust in the strength they had always found in one another. His presence brought a gentle steadiness, a reminder that they were not alone in their effort. But even with his guidance, the long hours of holding the ridge were beginning to show. Below them, William continued to watch the field with patient attention. He saw the small gaps that had begun to appear in the English formation, the slight unevenness that came from fatigue rather than fear. He understood that the shield wall was not broken, but it was no longer as firm as it had been at dawn. The long day had softened its edges, and the Normans could feel the subtle shift in the air. William adjusted his tactics with quiet care. He signaled for his archers to move once more, this time aiming their arrows in higher arcs, hoping they would fall behind the shields rather than against them. The arrows rose gently into the sky, drifting downward with soft, whispering sounds. Some found their mark, and the English line felt the quiet sting of each small loss. The Norman infantry advanced again, their steps steady, their movements deliberate. They pressed against the shield wall with patient persistence, testing its strength, feeling for the places where it had begun to loosen. The English resisted, leaning into their shields, pushing back with the same quiet resolve they had shown all day. But the long hours had taken their toll, and the pressure felt heavier now. Then, as the Normans pressed forward, another moment of uncertainty rippled through the English line. A small group of defenders, tired and stretched thin, stepped back slightly, creating a narrow opening. It was not a collapse, not a retreat, just a small shift born from exhaustion. But on a day like this, even the smallest change could carry great weight. William saw the opening and responded with calm precision. He directed his cavalry to move toward the gap, not with sudden speed, but with a slow, deliberate advance. The horses climbed the slope, their hooves pressing gently into the earth, their riders guiding them with steady hands. The English near the opening braced themselves, but without the full support of the shield wall, their position was fragile. The Normans pressed into the gap, widening it little by little. The English fought with determination, but the long hours had drained their strength, and the line began to stretch in ways it had not before. Harold saw the shift and moved to support the weakening section, but even his presence could not fully restore the unity that had been worn down by the day. Still, the English did not break. They held as best they could, their shields rising and falling with the rhythm of their breaths. The hill beneath them remained their ally, giving them height and grounding their feet, but the slow unraveling had begun, gentle and gradual, like a thread being pulled from a tightly woven cloth. The Normans continued their steady pressure, guided by William's patient observation. They did not rush, for they understood that the day would turn not through sudden force, but through the quiet persistence that had shaped every moment so far. The English continued to resist, their resolve strong even as their bodies grew weary. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the field. The air grew cooler, carrying with it the soft scent of earth and autumn leaves. The battle, still unfolding in its slow, deliberate rhythm, moved gently toward its final hours. The shield wall had not yet fallen, but it had begun to loosen, to stretch, to feel the weight of the long day. And in that gentle unraveling, the story of the battle continued to move forward, shaped by the quiet persistence of both armies beneath the soft autumn sky. Chapter 13. The Fall of the Shield Wall. As the afternoon light softened across Senlac Hill, the long hours of steady effort began to settle heavily on the English line. The shield wall, once firm and tightly woven, now carried the quiet marks of fatigue. The men who had stood shoulder to shoulder since morning felt the slow ache in their arms, the weight in their legs, and the gentle pull of weariness that came from holding their ground for so long. Yet they remained, bound by duty, by loyalty, and by the calm determination that had guided them through every moment of the day. Harold moved among them with steady presence, offering soft reassurance, reminding them to stay close, to breathe, to trust in the strength they still shared. His voice carried a quiet steadiness, a grounding warmth that helped ease the strain of the long battle. But even with his guidance, the shield wall was no longer the unbroken barrier it had been at dawn. Small gaps had appeared, subtle shifts in the line that came not from fear, but from the simple passage of time. Below the ridge, William continued to watch with patient attention. He saw the gradual softening of the English formation, the way the line no longer held quite as firmly, the way the men leaned more heavily on their shields. He understood that the moment he had waited for was approaching. Not through sudden force, but through the slow, natural unfolding of the day. He signaled once more to his archers, who stepped forward with calm precision. Their arrows rose into the sky in gentle arcs, drifting downward toward the English line. This time, the arrows found more openings than before, slipping through the small spaces that fatigue had created. The shield wall trembled slightly under the renewed pressure, though it still held. Then William directed his infantry to advance again, their steps steady, their movements deliberate. They climbed the slope with quiet persistence, pressing against the English line with the same patient force that had shaped the entire day. The English resisted, leaning into their shields, pushing back with the strength they had left. But the long hours had worn them down, and the pressure felt heavier now. As the infantry pressed forward, William signaled for his cavalry to move once more. The horses climbed the hill with slow, controlled strides, their riders guiding them with calm focus. The combined weight of infantry and cavalry created a gentle but unrelenting pressure, one that the English line struggled to absorb. Then, In the midst of this steady push, a larger gap opened in the shield wall. It was not dramatic, not sudden, but a simple widening of the space between tired men. The Normans saw it, and with quiet coordination they moved toward it. The English nearby tried to close the gap, but their bodies were heavy, their movements slower than before. The Normans pressed into the opening, widening it little by little. The shield wall, once so firm, began to loosen further, its unity stretched thin by the long day. Harold saw the shift and moved to support the weakening section, but even his presence could not fully restore the strength that had been worn away by hours of effort. The English fought with determination, their resolve unbroken even as their formation began to unravel. They held wherever they could, their shields rising and falling with the rhythm of their breaths, but the hill that had supported them now became a place where their line stretched unevenly, where the Normans could find small spaces to press through. William continued to guide his forces with calm precision. He did not rush, for he understood that the day would turn through steady persistence rather than sudden force. The Normans pressed forward, their movements coordinated, their efforts focused on the places where the shield wall had begun to thin. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the field, the English line finally began to give way. Not all at once, but gently, gradually, like a woven cloth slowly loosening under strain. The shield wall, which had held so firmly through the long morning and early afternoon, now softened, its unity slipping away as the Normans pressed through the widening gaps. Still, the English did not flee. They fought in small groups, standing together wherever they could, their determination steady even as the formation dissolved around them. Harold remained among them, a calm presence in the midst of the shifting lines, guiding, encouraging, and holding the center as long as he was able. The hill, once a place of strength, now became a place of quiet struggle, where the long hours of the day finally made themselves felt. The shield wall had fallen, not through sudden collapse, but through the slow, gentle unraveling that comes from time, effort, and the steady persistence of an opposing force. And as the late afternoon light settled softly over the field, the story of the battle moved toward its final moments, shaped by the quiet endurance of those who still stood and the patient determination of those who pressed forward. The day was nearing its end, though the calm rhythm of its unfolding continued, steady and unhurried, beneath the soft autumn sky. Chapter 14. The Last Stand of King Harold. As the late afternoon light settled gently across Senlac Hill, the long day of steady struggle drew slowly toward its final moments. The sun hung low in the sky, casting soft, lengthening shadows over the field, where the English and Norman armies continued their quiet, determined efforts. The air carried a coolness now, a reminder that evening was approaching, though the rhythm of the battle still moved with the same slow, deliberate pace that had shaped every hour before. The English line, once firm and tightly woven, had thinned under the weight of the long day. Small groups of soldiers still stood together, their shields raised, their breaths deep and steady. They fought not with haste, but with the calm persistence of men who understood the importance of each moment. Their movements were slower now, shaped by fatigue, yet their resolve remained quietly strong. Harold remained near the center of the field, a steady presence among his men. He had stood with them through every hour of the day, offering reassurance, guiding their efforts, and holding the line wherever it threatened to loosen. His presence brought a sense of grounding, a reminder that the heart of the English defense still beat with calm determination. Below the ridge, William continued to guide his forces with patient attention. He saw the gradual softening of the English resistance, the way the shield wall had unraveled, the way the remaining defenders now stood in smaller clusters rather than a single unified line. He understood that the moment of decision was approaching, not through sudden force, but through the gentle, inevitable unfolding of the long day. He signaled once more for his archers to advance. They stepped forward with quiet precision, lifting their bows and sending arrows into the sky in high, drifting arcs. The arrows fell softly among the English ranks, finding openings where shields no longer overlapped as tightly as before. The defenders absorbed the pressure as best they could, though each small loss carried weight. Then William directed his infantry and cavalry to press forward together, their movements coordinated, their steps steady. They climbed the slope with calm persistence, meeting the remaining English defenders with the same patient force that had shaped the entire battle. The English resisted, their shields rising and falling, their voices low and steady, but the long hours had worn them thin. Harold stood among his men, holding his ground with quiet strength. He fought not with haste, but with the same calm resolve he had shown throughout the day. Around him the defenders gathered, forming a small but determined circle of resistance. They held as long as they could, their movements slow but steady, their breaths deep and measured. The Normans pressed in, widening the gaps, shaping the flow of the battle with gentle persistence. The English circle grew smaller, its edges softening as the weight of the day settled upon it. Harold remained at its center, a steady figure in the fading light, guiding his men with calm presence even as the circle tightened around him. In the soft glow of the late afternoon, the final moments unfolded quietly. There was no sudden collapse, no sharp turning point, only the gradual, gentle closing of the circle as the Normans pressed forward. Harold, still standing among his men, continued to hold his ground until the very end, his presence steady even as the world around him shifted. When he fell, it was within the small ring of defenders who had remained by his side throughout the long day. His passing marked the quiet turning of the tide, the moment when the English resistance finally softened beyond recovery. Yet even in this moment, the field remained calm, the air still, the light gentle upon the hillside. With Harold's fall, the remaining English defenders began to withdraw, moving slowly down the far side of the hill. Their steps were steady, shaped not by panic but by the quiet understanding that the day had reached its end. The Normans did not rush after them. They held their ground, allowing the field to settle into stillness once more. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, the land grew quiet. The long day of Hastings had come to its gentle conclusion, shaped by patience, persistence, and the slow unfolding of countless small moments. The hill, touched by the soft light of evening, held the memory of the day in its quiet slopes and fading shadows. And in that stillness, the story of the battle settled into place, ready to be carried forward through time, remembered not for its noise or chaos, but for the calm, steady rhythm with which it had unfolded beneath the soft autumn sky. Chapter 15. Evening settles over the field. As the sun slipped gently toward the horizon, the soft light of late afternoon began to fade, leaving Senlac Hill wrapped in a quiet amber glow. The long day, shaped by steady effort and patient endurance, was drawing slowly to its close. The sounds of the battle, once a constant hum across the hillside, softened into scattered murmurs and the faint rustle of movement as the Normans secured the field and the remaining English withdrew into the gathering dusk. The air grew cooler, carrying with it the calm stillness that often follows a long and tiring day. The land itself seemed to exhale, releasing the tension that had held it since dawn. The gentle slopes of the hill, touched by the fading light, appeared peaceful once more, as though the earth wished to return to its natural quiet even as the memory of the day lingered in every shadow. The Normans moved with slow, deliberate care, tending to their wounded, gathering their scattered equipment, and forming small clusters of quiet conversation. There was no celebration, no loud triumph, only the calm, steady work of men who understood that the day had been long and that the night ahead would require rest. William, now recognized as the victor, oversaw these efforts with the same patient attention he had shown throughout the battle. He spoke softly to his commanders, ensuring that the field was secured and that the camp would be prepared for the night. On the far side of the hill, the remaining English moved away from the field with slow, measured steps. Their retreat was not chaotic, but quiet and steady, shaped by the understanding that the day had reached its end. They carried with them the weight of loss, yet also the calm dignity of those who had stood together through every hour of the long struggle. The soft light of evening touched their figures as they disappeared into the gentle folds of the landscape. The hill itself, which had held the weight of 2 armies since morning, now lay still. The grass, pressed flat in many places, swayed lightly in the evening breeze. The trees at the edges of the field stood silent, their leaves rustling softly as the first hints of night settled over them. The sky above shifted into deeper shades of gold and blue, the colors blending slowly as the sun dipped below the horizon. William's camp began to take shape once more, its fires glowing softly in the growing darkness. The flickering light cast gentle shadows across the tents and the figures moving among them. The Normans spoke in low voices, their words carried away by the breeze before they could travel far. There was a sense of quiet reflection in the air, a recognition that the day had been significant, though its full meaning would only unfold in the days and years to come. Far from the camp, the English who had survived found places to rest, their bodies weary, their minds heavy with the memory of the long day. Some sat in small groups, sharing soft words of comfort. Others lay down upon the earth, letting the cool air soothe their tired limbs. The night gathered around them gently, offering a moment of stillness after the long hours of effort. As darkness deepened, the stars began to appear, one by one, scattered across the sky like distant lanterns. They shone softly over the quiet field, over the resting armies, and over the land that had witnessed the slow, steady unfolding of a day that would be remembered for centuries. The moon rose with calm grace, casting a pale glow across the hillside, illuminating the gentle contours of the earth. In this quiet moment, the world seemed to pause once more. The battle was over, the day had ended, and the night offered a soft, steady silence that wrapped itself around the land like a comforting blanket. The story of Hastings had reached its turning point, though its echoes would continue to drift through time, carried gently by the memories of those who had lived it and the generations who would one day hear it told. And so the evening settled fully over the field, calm and unhurried, holding the land in a peaceful stillness as the long day faded into night. Chapter 16. A New Dawn for England. As night settled fully over the quiet fields near Hastings, the world seemed to rest in a deep and gentle stillness. The soft glow of the moon drifted across the land, touching the slopes of Senlac Hill, the scattered camps, and the winding paths that led away into the countryside. The long day had ended, and with it a chapter in England's story had quietly closed. Yet even in the calm of night, the first threads of a new beginning were already taking shape. William's camp lay quiet beneath the stars. The Normans rested after their long and steady efforts, their fires glowing softly in the darkness. There was no loud celebration, only the calm murmur of men settling into sleep, their bodies weary, their minds slowly easing away from the memory of the day. William himself remained awake for a time, walking slowly among his soldiers, offering quiet words, ensuring that the camp was secure. His steps were measured, his thoughts steady, shaped by the understanding that the victory at Hastings was only the beginning of a much longer journey. Across the land, the people of England slept uneasily, unaware of how deeply their world had shifted. News traveled slowly in those days, carried by travelers and whispered from village to village. Some would hear of the battle within days, others not for weeks, and many would learn of it only through the gentle changes that would begin to ripple through their daily lives. For now, the countryside remained peaceful, its fields resting beneath the soft blanket of night, untouched by the weight of what was to come. As dawn approached, the sky began to lighten once more. The first pale colors of morning spread gently across the horizon, brushing the land with soft shades of blue and gold. The world stirred slowly, as though waking from a long and thoughtful dream. Birdsong drifted through the air, quiet at first, then gradually growing as the light strengthened. William rose early, stepping out into the cool morning air. He looked across the land with calm, steady eyes, understanding that the crown he sought was not yet fully his. The battle had opened the path, but the journey ahead would require patience, care, and the same quiet determination that had carried him through the long day on Senlac Hill. He would need to move slowly, to earn the trust of the people, to shape his rule with steadiness rather than force. The Normans began to break camp, their movements unhurried. They gathered their supplies, tended to their horses, and prepared for the next steps of their journey. The land around them remained peaceful, touched by the soft light of morning. The memory of the battle lingered, but the world itself seemed ready to move forward, gently and without haste. In the days that followed, William traveled toward London, meeting both resistance and acceptance along the way. Villages watched him pass with quiet curiosity, unsure of what his rule would bring. Some offered support, others held back, waiting to see how the new order would unfold. William responded with patience, understanding that trust could not be demanded, only earned through steady and thoughtful action. When he finally reached London, the city received him with a mixture of caution and inevitability. The leaders of the realm, recognizing the turning of the tide, accepted him as king. And so, on a quiet day at the end of the year, William was crowned in Westminster Abbey, the soft glow of candlelight illuminating the moment that marked the beginning of a new chapter in England's story. Yet even then, the land remained calm. The fields continued to yield their harvests, the villages continued their daily rhythms, and the people continued their lives with the same gentle persistence that had carried them through countless seasons. The changes that followed would come slowly, unfolding over years rather than days, shaping the kingdom in ways both subtle and profound. For now, the dawn that followed the Battle of Hastings brought with it a sense of quiet possibility. A new king, a new chapter, a new path forward. The land, touched by the soft morning light, seemed to breathe gently, ready to carry its people into the future with the same calm endurance that had always defined it. And so the story of Hastings settled into history, not as a moment of sudden transformation, but as a slow, steady turning of the wheel of time, a moment when one chapter ended and another began, carried forward by the quiet rhythm of the land and the people who called it home. Chapter 17. The Quiet, the Aftermath. In the days that followed the Battle of Hastings, the land around Senlac Hill settled into a deep and gentle stillness. The soft autumn air drifted across the fields, carrying with it the faint scent of fallen leaves and the quiet hum of distant villages returning to their daily rhythms. The hill itself, once filled with the steady movements of two great armies, now lay calm beneath the changing sky, its slopes touched only by the slow passage of time. The Normans remained in the region for a short while, tending to their wounded and gathering what they needed before continuing their journey toward London. Their camp, once alive with preparation and careful coordination, grew quieter with each passing day. The fires burned lower, the voices softened, and the steady rhythm of marching feet gave way to the gentle sounds of rest. William moved among his men with calm purpose, ensuring that the transition from battle to travel unfolded smoothly and without haste. For the people of Sussex, life began to settle once more. The sudden arrival of the Normans had brought uncertainty, yet the days that followed were marked more by quiet observation than by fear. Villagers watched from a distance as the new presence in their land prepared to move on, unsure of what the future would bring, but grateful for the return of peaceful routines. The fields were tended again, the animals cared for, and the familiar rhythms of daily life resumed their gentle flow. Along the roads, leading away from the battlefield, small groups of English survivors made their way home. Their steps were slow, shaped by weariness and reflection. Some traveled alone, others in pairs or small clusters, offering one another quiet companionship as they walked. They carried with them the memory of the long day on Senlac Hill, a memory that would remain with them for the rest of their lives, though they spoke of it only in soft tones. The land itself seemed to hold the memory too. The grass, pressed flat in places, began to rise again. The earth, disturbed by the weight of countless footsteps, slowly settled back into its natural shape. The trees at the edges of the field rustled gently in the breeze, their leaves falling one by one as autumn deepened. Nature moved at its own unhurried pace, smoothing the marks of the battle with quiet patience. As William and his men continued their journey toward London, the countryside around them remained peaceful. The roads wound through forests and fields, past small villages and quiet streams. The Normans traveled with steady discipline, their movements calm and measured. They understood that the land they now moved through would soon become their home, and they treated it with the same careful respect that had guided their actions since their arrival. In London, the news of the battle spread slowly, carried by travelers and whispered through markets and taverns. Some heard it with sorrow, others with resignation, and still others with cautious curiosity. The city, large and full of life, continued its daily rhythms even as it prepared for the arrival of a new king. The people did not yet know what William's rule would bring, but they sensed that a new chapter was beginning. One that would unfold gradually, shaped by time and by the quiet persistence of everyday life. Back on Senlac Hill, the days passed gently. The soft light of morning touched the slopes, the afternoons warmed the earth, and the evenings wrapped the land in cool, calming shadows. The memory of the battle lingered, but it did so quietly, woven into the landscape like a faint echo. The hill remained a place of stillness, a place where the past rested softly beneath the turning of the seasons, and so the aftermath of Hastings unfolded not with sudden change, but with slow, steady transitions. The land healed, the people adjusted, and the story of the battle settled into the quiet spaces of memory. It became part of the fabric of England's history, carried forward not by noise or haste, but by the gentle passage of time. The world moved on, calm and unhurried, into the new dawn that awaited it. Chapter 18. The Slow Shaping of a New Kingdom. In the weeks that followed William's coronation, England entered a period of gentle but unmistakable change. The shift did not come all at once, nor did it sweep across the land with sudden force. Instead, it moved slowly, like the gradual turning of a season, touching one place and then another, settling quietly into the rhythms of daily life. The countryside remained peaceful in those early days. Fields continued to be plowed, markets continued to open, and families continued to gather around their hearths as they always had. The familiar sounds of village life, soft voices, the clatter of tools, the lowing of cattle, carried on without interruption. For many, the world felt much the same as it had before, even though they knew that a new king now guided the realm. William understood the importance of this gentle continuity. He did not rush to impose sweeping changes. Instead, he moved with patience, observing the land, listening to its people, and allowing the natural rhythms of England to continue. He traveled slowly through the countryside, meeting local leaders, offering reassurance, and showing that his rule would be steady rather than harsh. In some places, Norman soldiers settled into small garrisons, their presence calm and orderly. They built simple wooden structures, tended their horses, and learned the patterns of the land they now lived in. Their voices, speaking a different language, blended gradually with the sounds of English life, creating a quiet mixture that would, over time, become familiar. The English nobles, too, began to adjust. Some accepted William's rule with quiet pragmatism, understanding that stability was better than continued conflict. Others held back, uncertain of what the future would bring, yet unwilling to disturb the fragile peace that had settled over the kingdom. William met each with patience, offering positions, responsibilities, and gentle assurances that their lands and traditions would be respected. In the monasteries and churches, life continued with its usual calm. Monks copied manuscripts by candlelight, their quills moving slowly across parchment. Priests tended to their congregations, offering comfort and guidance as they always had. The church, steady and enduring, became a bridge between the old and the new, helping the people adjust to the quiet changes unfolding around them. As winter approached, the land grew still. Frost touched the fields in the early mornings, and the days shortened into long, peaceful evenings. Villagers gathered indoors, sharing stories, mending tools, and preparing for the colder months. The memory of the battle at Hastings lingered, but it did so softly, like a distant echo carried on the wind. William spent the winter months in careful planning. He studied the customs of the English, learned the structure of their laws, and considered how best to blend Norman practices with the traditions of the land he now ruled. He understood that lasting peace would come not from force, but from thoughtful integration, from allowing the two cultures to grow together slowly, naturally, like two branches of the same tree. And so the early days of Norman rule unfolded with quiet steadiness. There were no sudden upheavals, no sweeping decrees, only the gentle shaping of a kingdom finding its new balance. The people watched, waited, and continued their lives, trusting that the land they loved would endure through this new chapter just as it had through all the chapters before. In this calm period, England began to change, not abruptly, but gradually, with the soft patience of time itself. The seeds of a new era were planted gently, their roots taking hold beneath the surface, ready to grow in the years to come. And as the kingdom settled into this new rhythm, the story of Hastings became part of the past, a quiet turning point that had guided England into a future shaped by both continuity and change. Chapter 19. The blending of two worlds. As the months passed gently beyond the Battle of Hastings, England entered a quiet period of gradual transformation. The changes that unfolded did not sweep across the land with sudden force. Instead, they moved softly, like mist drifting over fields at dawn, touching one village and then another, settling slowly into the rhythms of daily life. The Normans, now part of the landscape, began to live alongside the English in ways that were calm and steady. They built homes near existing settlements, tended their horses in shared pastures, and learned the patterns of the land they had come to rule. Their language, unfamiliar at first, drifted through markets and along roads, mingling gently with the English tongue. Over time, the two sounds blended, creating a soft mixture that would shape the future of the kingdom. In many places, life continued much as it always had. Farmers rose with the sun, guiding their plows through the soil. Craftsmen shaped wood and metal with practiced hands. Children played in the fields, their laughter carrying lightly on the breeze. The presence of new rulers did not disturb these simple rhythms. Instead, it settled around them like a new season, noticeable but not overwhelming. William moved through his new kingdom with patient care. He listened to local leaders, learned the customs of the land, and made decisions with a steady hand. He understood that trust could not be demanded. It had to grow slowly, like a seed taking root in the earth. So he allowed the English to keep many of their traditions, blending them gently with Norman practices in a way that felt natural rather than forced. In the great halls of the realm, English and Norman nobles began to meet, their conversations quiet and measured. They discussed land, law, and the needs of the people, finding common ground in the shared responsibility of guiding the kingdom. At first, their interactions were cautious, shaped by uncertainty. But as time passed, a sense of cooperation began to take hold, softening the boundaries between the two groups. The church played a calming role in this slow blending. Monasteries continued their peaceful work, copying manuscripts, tending gardens, and offering guidance to those who sought it. Priests spoke to their congregations about patience, unity, and the gentle strength that comes from understanding. The church's steady presence helped ease the transition, offering a familiar anchor in a time of quiet change. Even the landscape began to reflect the merging of cultures. New buildings rose beside old ones, their styles different yet harmonious. Stone keeps appeared on hilltops, their walls strong and simple, watching over the countryside with calm vigilance. Villages expanded slowly, their paths winding between English cottages and Norman structures, creating a tapestry of shared life. Through all of this, the memory of the battle remained, but it softened with time. It became a story told in low voices by firesides, a reminder of a day that had shaped the kingdom's path. Yet it did not overshadow the present. The people, both English and Norman, were more concerned with the gentle tasks of living, harvesting crops, raising families, and tending to the land that sustained them. And so the blending of the two worlds continued, quiet and unhurried. It was not a merging born of force, but of time, patience, and the steady rhythms of daily life. The kingdom grew into something new, shaped by the strengths of both cultures, woven together like threads in a single enduring cloth. In this calm unfolding, England found its new identity, one that would carry it forward through the centuries, rooted in the gentle blending that began in the peaceful months after Hastings. Chapter 20. The gentle echo through time. As years began to pass, the memory of the Battle of Hastings softened into something quieter, something woven gently into the fabric of England's story. What had once been a single long day of steady struggle became, over time, a calm echo carried through generations, its sharp edges worn smooth by the patient passing of centuries. Villages grew, fields shifted, and new paths wound their way across the countryside. Children played on hillsides where armies had once stood, unaware of the weight those slopes had carried. Farmers plowed the earth, turning soil that had long since healed, its surface giving no sign of the footsteps that had pressed upon it so many years before. The land, with its quiet resilience, embraced the future without forgetting the past. Stories of the battle were told in soft voices by hearth fires. Elders spoke of Harold, the steadfast king who had marched the length of England to defend his realm. They spoke of William, the patient and determined leader whose calm persistence had shaped the outcome of the day. These stories were not told with bitterness or triumph, but with the gentle understanding that history is shaped by many hands, and that each moment, no matter how great, eventually settles into memory. As the generations continued, the blending of English and Norman ways deepened. Families with roots in both cultures lived side by side, their traditions intertwining like branches of the same growing tree. Language shifted slowly, absorbing new words, new sounds, new rhythms, until the voices of the people carried traces of both worlds. Customs blended as well, forming a culture that felt familiar yet quietly transformed. The great changes that followed Hastings unfolded gradually. New laws were written, new buildings rose, and new ways of governing took shape. Yet these changes came with the same gentle pace that had marked the early years of William's rule. Nothing rushed, nothing forced, only the slow, steady shaping of a kingdom finding its new balance. In time, the battle itself became a distant memory, preserved in chronicles, in quiet stories, and in the soft contours of the land. Senlac Hill remained. Touched by the wind and the turning seasons, a peaceful place where the past rested beneath the grass and the sky. Visitors would one day walk its slopes, feeling the calm of the landscape without needing to imagine the long day that had once unfolded there. And through all of this, England continued to grow. Its people lived, worked, and dreamed beneath the same sky that had watched over the battle. They carried forward the gentle strength of those who came before them, shaping their world with patience, resilience, and quiet hope. The echo of Hastings remained, but it was no longer a sound of conflict. It was a soft reminder of how history moves, slowly, steadily, like a tide that reshapes the shore not with sudden waves, but with the gentle persistence of time. And so, the story of the battle settled into its place, not as a moment of noise or turmoil, but as a calm turning point in the long unfolding journey of a kingdom that learned to grow, to blend, and to endure. Thank you for spending this time with me tonight. If you enjoyed this quiet journey through history, feel free to like the video and subscribe for more stories told in this calm, steady way. Rest well, take care of yourself, and have a peaceful good night.